I feel the need for speed and UAPs with special guest Chris Lehto. Episode 25 and Season 1 finale of the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. Coming to you from the glacial dumping grounds known as the Michigan Basin. I'm Michelle.
And I am Wayne.
And we are a Michigan-based husband and wife educator and podcasting duo that after having a UFO sighting in March of 2018, have started to examine UFOs and other paranormal topics within Michigan and beyond.
Topics include UFOs, the paranormal, conspiracy theories, ghosts, alternative history and archaeology, cryptids, and all things strange and paranormal. So sit back, grab a drink, and come along with us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole. Oh my goodness, it's episode 25 on February 25th, 2022, and
Absolutely, Goose. It is 1 year.
1 year, so this is our season 1 finale. This is gonna be awesome, and what a crazy ride it's been since we started this.
It's been a great year. We've met a lot of great people, interesting stories the whole way through.
And we learned a lot, too. I mean, just from the people we've come in contact with that we never thought we would be talking with, and the things that we're talking about just really blows my mind where everything has kind of gone in this
and where it will continue
journey
to go.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and just jump into this because we have one of the most awesome guests. I can't believe he agreed to come on the podcast and have a good time with us, even though the time was short.
Straight out of beautiful Portugal.
Yes. Chris Lehto from Portugal, a retired F-16 fighter pilot turned YouTuber and UAP investigator. So this is going to be an awesome interview, and I couldn't have thought of a better guest to close out season 1 with than Chris Lehto.
So just to let everybody know that our shows are now uploaded onto YouTube as well. So make sure to search for us on YouTube by typing in Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. You'll see the channel there, so make sure to click like and subscribe.
Yes, hopefully our URL will be changing here relatively soon to a much easier way that we can tell people to find our channel, because it's kind of hard right now on YouTube.
We've finally gotten to the point that I believe that we get our own domain now.
Well, at least we get some kind of a shortcut URL instead of what they give us. But anyways, yes, get onto YouTube, find us, subscribe, and hit that like button for your favorite episodes.
Don't forget, we're also, of course, on Facebook with the Facebook group. And then also on Instagram, you can follow us over there at MIUFOSPEP. So information with new show news will be updated as it becomes available. And we're also on Twitter at MI_UFO.
If you like the podcast and would like to rock out some of the latest swag, head on over to our online store at MIUFO Podcast Store, all one word, .online, to check out all of our cool gear. And don't forget to check out our Patreon page if you would like to support the podcast there. It is patreon.com/MIUFOSPEP, where you can sign up. We can't wait to give you a shout out for all of your support.
And don't forget, it's not just the interviews of some great people and the stories that they have, but we also love to hear your stories as well. So if you have a story you would like to tell, we would like to talk to you. You can reach out to us at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com. Send us a brief summary of your experience and we'll contact you to discuss things further and try to get you or your story on the podcast.
And don't forget that all of the links that we talked about, you can find below in our show notes. All right, Michelle, I think it's that time.
It's time for What's in the News.
Yes. What is in the news?
Well, the New York Post gave us this one on February 25th of this year, and it looks like it was after they looked at an article from The Sun just 3 days prior. This is Mysterious Bulging Triangle UFO filmed over city for 2 hours. Alien hunters were left stunned after a bulging triangle UFO was filmed lurking over a major city for 2 hours. The unusual object was spotted prowling the skies of Islamabad, Pakistan, in broad daylight by an extraterrestrial enthusiast. Gobsmacked Arslan Warak says he spent a lengthy 2 hours watching the triangular shape hovering above the capital city. The 33-year-old was mesmerized by the unusual object drifting over the city's wealthy DHA-1 district, and the clip has now sent skywatchers' tongues wagging. He recorded the UFO making the most of the clear airspace for over 12 minutes from different angles to acquire the best view. The businessman, formerly of Birmingham, then shared the unbelievable sighting on the internet for other alien fanatics to enjoy. Arslan explained, "I still don't know what it was. I filmed it for over 12 minutes at different times, took dozens of pictures, and observed it for the best part of 2 hours. To the naked eye, it seemed like a black round rock, but as I zoomed in, I could see it was roughly the shape of a triangle with a clear bulge on top towards the back.
It was solid black and had no sharp edges. It wasn't reflecting too much light, and no lights were emanating from it. In the extraordinary footage, the mystifying object is seen hanging motionless over the hustle and bustle of the capital city below. A fly and several birds then also crossed into the shot, showing the clear difference between the creatures and the distant UFO. Arslan added, "I don't know what it was, but I know what it wasn't. It wasn't a bird. I actually got birds in the clip while I was filming this thing. I fly drones myself, so I know it wasn't a commercial drone either. And it makes no sense for our military to be flying secret drones over a posh area of Islamabad where most of the army and government officers live."
After sharing the enthralling clip online, he sparked a frenzy amongst fellow UFO hunters who applauded the clarity of the sighting. One admirer wrote, "The recording is extremely high quality, not just for the technical achievement of such extended physical effort to track it for so long, but also for the extended verbal commentary and description of the event. Do you realize how rare a document like this is?" Another viewer added, "This is how you capture a UFO." While a third conspiracy theorist suggested the interestingly shaped object was a perfect match for a sighting they'd had in New York. They wrote, "It was just like this, not blinking lights, no nothing, just floating in the sky for about 4 minutes, and then went up until it was completely gone." Arslan stayed to appreciate the curious shape swirling in the skies until it was too dark to see it.
Yeah, one thing about making a video of a UFO is that it is always really good to capture like birds in the area really quickly. You want to get buildings in the foreground and what's around you, so it helps determine distance. And so when people analyze these videos, they have a reference point to be able to say, okay, where this person is standing, they are 50 feet from this building, and then they can determine altitude and things like that. So it's really good to use your camera to get a picture of the surroundings and where you're at, and then film the UFO. So this is really well done.
Well, and the zooming in too, if that's how he was able to zoom in, that is just the resemblance to a triangle is just eerie.
It is very strange. I mean, in the fact that, okay, if it was a bird, it would be moving. If it was a piece of debris or some kind of a plane or something in the wind at those altitudes, it should still be moving. And this thing is just sitting there. And by the way, you guys can all see pictures of this in the article and watch some of the video. Follow the link to the post and you will see the actual picture and what's going on in the video.
So, to continue, he brushed off skeptics' comments, insisting regardless of what he saw, humans are not alone in the universe. The 33-year-old continued, with the number of stars and planets in the known universe, it is statistically impossible that we are the only intelligent beings in this universe. There must be civilizations which are millions or billions of years more advanced than us, and then there must be others that are just starting out.
Have they visited Earth? I think we have to look at the evidence and go where it leads. There is certainly a possibility. It comes after alien hunters claimed NASA accidentally captured a flying saucer zooming above the Earth on an unearthed image from the Apollo 9 mission. They suggested the picture showing the tiny black triangle lurking among the clouds was mistakenly shared by the space agency, whatever that might mean. So this is very, very interesting, and I think it's legit. I'm just saying, it looks legit to me.
Not just over the skies of Michigan.
Nope, we're over in Pakistan now, so I think we need to get into Communication Corner, and I think we have another story from Lance.
Well, we do. We have a continuation of a story from Lance. So he writes, years back, a couple buddies of mine and I took the old camper out hoping to catch a deer in Muskegon, Michigan. There was a cornfield at the edge of the property we were on. One night, along a line of trees, we witnessed a triangular UFO level with the line of trees, possibly 50 feet or so in the air. It looked to be at least 40 feet wide. At the center of the triangle, there was a large circle that continued to get bigger and smaller, so almost like a pulsating.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like a pulsating.
Yeah.
But again, our triangle that we saw, that did not have that central type of light. So there's definitely different craft out there of the triangular shapes.
Well, it also says there was a circle that rotated, spinning around the circle ball in the center. Additionally, there was a round light on each point of the triangle. It was dark, black in color. It made no sound at all as it moved along the line of the cornfield. My buddies and I watched it for at least 10 minutes before it zipped away until it was no more than a dot in the sky. This reminded me of so many times fishing off the pier at Lake Michigan and seeing things in the sky that were not airplanes due to the zigzag patterns that would fly and the up and down motions that they would make. I've seen a lot, no matter what anyone's beliefs are. I know that there is something else out there, and I've seen it.
We're going to go ahead and jump into some shoutouts, starting with The Midnight Truck Stop, hosted by Big T and Blue Knight. A very cool couple of guys with a great concept as they explore those strange and unexplained incidents that so many of us have experienced while traveling along desolate highways. Give them a listen as they collect stories from all around the country from truckers and travelers alike.
Next, we've got the Lost in the Dark podcast, hosted by Burton and Aaron. This is a pretty cool podcast that bills itself as an attempt to capture incredible conversations between best friends as we explore all of our passions, but especially music and the world of heavy metal. So if you're into paranormal investigations and loud heavy metal music, give them a listen. Strong language, but it's heavy metal and the paranormal. What else would you expect?
Next up, we have Kosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast. Yes, Randall, we're looking at you. You need to come on the podcast. It is their mission to investigate and document the catastrophic history of the world and the evidence for advanced knowledge in earlier cultures. You will also learn of the profound effect it has on human civilization, both past and future. its relevance to Earth herself, and how to successfully cope with the inevitable changes that are sure to visit our dynamic geocosmic system.
And we've got Christina Gomez and the Shifting the Paradigm podcast. This podcast features a weekly interview that focuses on a wide variety of mysterious topics related to UFO, UAP sightings, and the possibility of alien visitation in the present and the past. Christina Gomez interviews researchers, witnesses, enthusiasts, and field investigators on their own pursuits of the truth behind the mysteries. Also included is Christina's new show called Mysteries with a History, where Christina will be covering a wide variety of topics from unexplained disappearances to UFO sightings to encounters with bizarre creatures and so much more that can come under the umbrella of the extraordinary, the strange, the paranormal, and the supernatural.
All right, it is time to move into our interview with Chris Lehto. I want to say first and foremost that this interview was outstanding. I loved every minute of it. The downside to this interview is that we only had an hour to talk. We could have probably gone for another 3 or 4 hours easily. And I hope that we will get him back on the podcast soon. So, Michelle, why don't you tell us about our guest today, Chris Lehto?
Well, Chris writes, I was an F-16 pilot for 18 years and retired mid-2020. I had an amazing career, but have moved on to a new phase, and now I live the expat lifestyle with my wife and 3 kids in Lagos, Portugal. I spend my free time making investigative YouTube videos about unexplained aerial phenomena. I started making videos to try and impress my kids. Their dreams to become YouTubers have since changed, but now find meaning and motivation to use my experience towards solving the UAP mystery.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is our honor and privilege to welcome all the way from Lagos, Portugal,
Chris Lehto.
Yeah, great. Happy to be here, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
Oh, dude, the honor is all ours. I've been watching all your videos and I'm like, this guy is just like me when it comes to thinking about these things. I'm more of a nuts and bolts guy. I'm a science teacher. My wife and I saw a UFO. It changed everything for us. And then I see you doing your analysis and everything of the videos, which we'll get into. And it's scientific, and I like that. And I can wrap my brains and my hands around the physics and the trigonometry and the calculus and all that good stuff. So I do want to dive into that with you. So thank you for joining us once again.
Excellent. Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, Chris, we're going to start things out by asking, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background before you started examining UFO or UAPs?
Okay, definitely. Yeah, I grew up in Houston, Texas. I played soccer and tennis growing up. I was always interested in science. You know, I really like chemistry. I did well at it. So when I went to university, I got into the Air Force Academy. You know, my buddy in physics class actually kept telling me about it. His dad was a naval aviator, and he told me about, you know, basically he went to Annapolis actually, and he's actually was a commander of a F-18 squadron. Recently. I haven't talked to him that much, to be honest, but he basically told me about the Air Force Academy. I applied, I went there. It was basically an opportunity, you know, you can't pass up. They let me in. I was surprised, to be honest. But I went, and it was very challenging. And I really enjoyed it. Looking back, I guess, enjoy is I wouldn't call it enjoy. But it was a very intense and worthwhile experience, I guess. So I graduated from the Air Force Academy in material science. So I got a degree in material science. It's a branch of chemistry, and that it was quite new at the time. This was in 2000. There was only 6 actually bachelors in material science in the U.S. At least we were told. That was me and 5 other people at the Air Force Academy. So kind of cutting edge in many ways. So material science, graduated in 2000, and then entered the Air Force, and then flew as a F-16 pilot.
And how long did you do as a F-16 pilot?
So the whole career, essentially, that's a very broad term. Basically it's kind of your primary job, but everyone has a secondary job, especially in the F-16 community. It's a single seat aircraft. So there's half of us compared to a F-15 or an F-18 squadron. With all these F-18 encounters, they have two people in the plane. They have the pilot, and they have certain duties, primarily navigating, flying. They do certain air-to-air engagements, and then they have the weapons system officer in the back, and they're focused more on the systems. Operating the air-to-ground. They're specialists on the air-to-ground weapons. So yeah, generally they have two people, so they have double the people to do all these additional duties. So you always have an additional duty. So as far as my additional duties, I was a safety officer, which I took very seriously. Actually, I really enjoyed it. You mentioned science, and it was investigation. I really like that. Looking through, considering how a plane actually crashes. You can get very detailed information from the fan blades. Because if a turbine is spinning, right, you can actually calculate just from looking at the turbine, how fast the RPMs were going on the engine when it impacts the ground, right? And you can actually tell from the angle of impact exactly how fast that engine was spinning at the time, which can tell you a lot of details about, was the pilot trying to go around? And you look at this recent F-35 crash on the aircraft carrier, right? So you could tell there is, say no one survived, right? And you got no other information. The engine's such a heavy metal steel part, normally made out of titanium. It's able to withstand intense temperatures. So from those turbine blades, you can determine back to, was the pilot engaging the afterburner, right? You could tell. So then that would tell you, the pilot was trying to go around and something happened. So you can really deduce from very minute details back to what happened. What happened, causation. And then from causation, now you can determine steps to decrease that in the future. Initially it's just procedural steps. You're going to institute, don't do that. You're going to tell people don't do that. All the way up to, can we actually engineer this out of the equation? Can you take that error completely out of the equation through these steps, and then that goes back. It's a feedback loop that goes back into the appropriation, basically systems engineering aspect, and then they make the systems more safe. So I really enjoyed that. I did safety for a while, as well as simulators, aggressor. So very varied career. It was very intense. Every week was 60 to 80 hours a week, intense, but all very interesting. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, those hours that you put in each week might answer this next question. Why did you decide to retire to Portugal?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've lived all around. I wouldn't say the world, I guess. We lived in Italy, South Korea, Turkey, Alaska, and then finally Spain. And once you live outside of your home country for, a decade, it's very hard, I found, to go back because you can see, it's so easy to see like the cracks, the obvious hypocrisies. And yeah, so anyway, well, we really liked Europe, and Europe I find is very, it has a good balance, a better balance, I think, between family, lifestyle, and work. It's very safe. There's no weapons. I feel very safe everywhere I go. Walking around, my kids walk to school every day, or not every day, but they do walk to school. 10 years old, they take the bus. And Portugal is open to immigration. So it was right here. I love to surf. So we just moved to Portugal, tried it out, and yeah, we love it so far. It exceeded our expectations.
What was it that first made you interested in this UFO UAP phenomenon, especially coming from a military combat pilot background?
It was 100% the David Fravor interview. The first one with Lex Fridman. That one really just changed my whole perspective, really, because basically just from it's a 2.5-hour interview that David Fravor had, that initial one, and he goes through and just explains in such detail, and I just feel like I know him. I've worked with people like him for decades previously. I was an Air Force pilot as well. I kind of glossed over that part, but a lot of it is again, very intense training, very intense practice through all the different types of mission sets. Fravor kind of you get a sense of what knowledge base is there when he starts talking about basically anything related to aviation or the systems. He went to Top Gun school. He was a commander right when the Nimitz happened. He was just a month as a new squadron commander, and it's very difficult to get to that position. Everyone that starts as a fighter pilot, I think, that makes it, right, you make it through pilot training. It's quite difficult. You have to have enough spots there. They have to need the fighters at the time, so it's very difficult to get there and to excel. And everyone that does do that, or that starts fighter training or as a fighter pilot, wants to be a squadron commander. Ultimately, that's kind of like the dream. I guess I don't know too many other careers, but I guess it would be like tenure or something, or you made it. There can only be one person that's squadron commander, and they only have so many commander positions. A squadron in a F-16 squadron, you have 30, 40 people in the squadron, only one squadron commander. I mentioned the F-18 squadrons, they have twice as many people. So maybe they have 70, 80 people, only one squadron commander. So it's very difficult to get to that position. And everyone wants to get to that position. So the fact he made it there, and he's a Top Gun instructor, and just how he described the engagement, it was almost like I haven't seen the UAP ever. I'd love to, but I felt like I was there. Basically, if someone and really trust, someone like in your family, related this experience to you, and then you have to be like, yeah, I believe it. And then 3 other people were there that corroborated it, plus hundreds of other witnesses, all the radar data, Kevin Day, Gary Voorhees. It's just so much evidence. Once you start pulling that string, it just keeps going, and I think it just keeps going.
So, we can say that David Fravor was pretty much the top of the top. When you get to be a squadron commander of a high-tech fighter squadron on a carrier, he's no slouch. That's like the guy you want in that position, and it takes a lot to get there. Is that assessment correct?
Yes, yeah, without a doubt. And just talking to him, you see he's level-headed. I'm sure his passion, I could tell you probably why he entered the Air Force. Why he entered the Navy, is he probably loves to fly. He probably loves, he's probably patriotic. He probably goes to church. He's probably would take care of his mom and dad. He's
right,
like your
right.
kind of all-American. And I think that's who you want in that position. And not just that's who you want, but it's a mold. It took him 14 years of 70-hour weeks, months and months and months away from his family, on a ship in bunks, in all these training situations. They spend millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars actually, to send you through Top Gun. That's a very expensive training out in the Southwest. So it's also his proficiency at that point, because it's a very perishable skill. You lose it immediately. Flying, and very quickly, a few weeks, and you will start to see your edge slip. And if I hadn't flown for a month, I could seriously tell it. And 6 weeks now, you're talking about kind of safety related. Now I'm just focusing on being safe, and then after maybe a week or two getting back in the plane and flying, now I can start thinking about getting ahead of the jet. We call it getting behind the jet. Right. Essentially, so it just takes a while. So just at that point, not only was he good enough to get to that position, but he's also proficient at that point. He's been flying probably many, many hours, instructing many, many hours. He used to looking outside, talking to someone else. Hey, do you see that down there? Talking their eyes on to contacts on the ground. He's definitely, he changed my perspective. Before that, I didn't believe anything in UFOs. Didn't even think about it. At all, to be honest. I had the scientific view, the standard scientific view. Faster than light travel is not possible. everything's so far away. If we had heard, if there was life out there, why haven't seen any signals? Basically, the standard scientific argument for why it couldn't be possible.
Well, then your brain and my brain work alike.
Did that happen to you? Did it change or?
Well, based off what we saw in 2018, I mean, Wayne can even tell you the first thing out of my mouth was, when did our military get that?
Yeah. And I have a background in aviation, not a big one. My dad is a retired United pilot. I've been flying since I was like 2 years old. One of my earliest memories is being in, a Cherokee, flying to my dad's house, and picking me up and flying me there. And I even have a little bit of GA background in flying single engine Cessnas and stuff. So when you talk about getting in front of the aircraft or being behind, that workload, you're talking about the workload in the cockpit of the plane, making sure you're in front and planning ahead. You always want to be 10 steps ahead of that aircraft, because just in case, you're always looking for a place to land in case the engine dies and you can't start it. You're got your checklist ready. So I'm right there with you. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because I find this fascinating from a career fighter pilot standpoint and view. And the reason I'm asking these questions about Fravor and such as yourself is that I'm trying to establish a pattern here that a lot of civilians don't understand when it comes to military aviators, is that you guys are no slouches. The training is not easy. It's not Microsoft Flight Simulator stuff. This stuff that you guys go through to become trained observers and weapon systems operators, you guys are no nonsense guys when you're in that cockpit, because you have to make these life or death decisions, and one wrong move, one wrong spotting thing can cost you or cost somebody on the ground their life. So I was just wondering, could you expand a little bit on the training that's involved and kind of dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I guess I would say that the combat, much like sports, right? I guess what kind of drew me to it, I've always been not a historian, I guess, but very interested in history, especially historical warfare. And growing up in middle school, I would always do the reports, if it was possible, on some type of catapult system or how knights were able to rule the ancient battlefield, and basically you can come up with all these fancy theories, right? And you can make these fancy simulators. But at the end of the day, when the bullet goes through your brain, right, it kind of solves the equation. So I guess that's kind of graphic, but it is graphic in the end. You can, and I've noticed that, I've flown with a lot of other countries. I flew with Turkey, I flew in their Air Force, and I've flown, with the South Koreans and all through Europe, et cetera. And you have to remember is that these tactics that we're using, we didn't just, come up with these in the past few weeks. All of this training, this system, it came out of World War II, right? Out of the military industrial complex that won the war, essentially. And it's really written in blood. That's what they say about Navy training. I actually went to Navy training for my initial, and they say the NATOPS training manual is written in blood, right? Essentially. Because all these tactics and the way the training is done has been learned through combat, right? Actually losing countless lives, how many lives, billions and billions of dollars over the last 100 years of this machine, the military machine. And they've gotten very good at producing combat systems, and that's what I think a fighter system is. It's a fusion of a human operator, which fuse the information. Basically, the human does the sensor fusion now, right? And combined with a flying machine, essentially. It's one system. You talk to fighter pilots, what they talk about is they basically meld with the machine. I can hear through the radar warning receiver at further distances. You feel this. Same thing happens in a car, right? When you're driving in a car, you're kind of a different thing, right? Even people act differently when they get in a car. You see road rage, that. You become kind of a different system. But anyway, the point is that the old school fighter pilot techniques that I'm using, right? I was able to show that the gimbal stayed within 10 nautical miles. I think those are very powerful because it's simple and it's been proven over 100 years, right? And as a science teacher that you've probably taught many different things that, and you've probably taught things in the past that we know now to be wrong. I'm sure you have, right? At some point. So I think that's the difference is the training of the combat, especially the combat aviators. Okay. When we talk about cargo, I mean, I'm not out there to hammer any cargo planes but it is a different, it's a whole different ball game. It really is. They just don't have people able to die if they mess up. C-130 pilots is different. I have friends that flew C-130s, and they did more combat time than I did. And I'm sure in their instance, their training is actually exceptional because the risks are just so high. And after some point in time, you can think whatever you want. All right, but if you go out there and you crash and die, that pretty much solves the equation. Right? Or if you get shot by the enemy, that also solves the equation in combat. So the U.S., we've just ground our military. It's not like we just came up with these training tactics over a few years. This is 80, 90 years of combat essentially. So, that's a long answer.
Good answer, because it kind of leads into the next set of questions I want to ask you. So there's the 3 famous UAP videos that were leaked or eventually released by the Navy, the gimbal, the go fast, and the TikTok. Can you give us, with your background and everything, now that you've explained 18 years of going through this training, 70, 80 hours a week, can you give us what your conclusions that you reached based on your analysis and expertise in those weapon systems? And from being a fighter pilot, what kind of conclusion did you come to?
Yeah, sure. Let's, I guess we can just kind of go through them one by one. I guess the hardest one to show that it's anomalous would be the go fast. And really it's because I can't show that it's not a weather balloon because of parallax. So that would mean that it's probably or possibly a weather balloon. When you talk to the pilots though, when you hear them, to them, obviously they're not just engaging a stationary weather balloon. I really believe that. So from the go fast, I would say I can't show that it's anything other than, I guess, a sphere that may or may not be stationary. I think it's moving close to the water, but it could just be, or I can't prove that it's not a stationary weather balloon, because really I can't, right? It doesn't make sense that the pilot and Wizzo would talk about it in the manner or how they locked it. Doesn't really make sense to me because I believe they saw it with their eyes because they throw the targeting pod out in front, basically the way they captured it. But I can't prove that it's not a weather balloon, right? So on that, I would say I can't prove it. It seems it would be very weird that a combat pilot and Wizzo would be surprised and lock onto a weather balloon. So I would say that's basically the go fast one. Any questions on that? Or?
No, I totally agree. It's one of those things where it's like there's just not enough information. But like you said, the reaction of a highly trained crew in a military aircraft, the video is one thing, their reaction seems to be something else. But I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And, those videos are much longer, actually. We record as soon as I start the jet, especially the more recent ones when we got digital. 2004, they were using 8mm tapes. So those would only have, you didn't want to run them out. So you would turn them off and on in between engagements. But the gimbal, go fast, they were in the modern age or moderner. So that would be digital tapes. So they turn them on the ground. So it's just a recording. They should have had, I'm curious to see what happens the next 5 minutes, or not even 5 minutes. If I had another minute, I could. I was just listening to, on the way driving down here, I was listening to Kevin Knuth, and he's done a lot of work on these things, and that's what he said is it seems like they leaked like the most vanilla of all of the recordings. We can't really see whether it's obviously a crazy maneuver, a zigzagging maneuver, some sort of acceleration that can't be explained. We can talk to Flare One, I guess, next. Yeah.
Well, speaking about the gimbal, I think it is the gimbal where you can hear the radar operator, the Wizzo in the back say, wow, look at them all. There's a fleet of them. They're all on the ASA. And nobody has ever broken that down. And he's talking about a fleet of these things that they're locking in the targeting pod, correct?
Well, so the ASA is the SA page. I think it's situational awareness.
Situational awareness, yeah.
Yeah, so you have you have pages you can bring up on your displays, right? We had 2 displays, but they have 3, I believe. And one of them is an overhead view. So situational awareness. It's like Halo, if you play Halo or any airplane game.
Sure. Or like was it DCS or any kind of a combat video game, things like that.
Well, DCS actually mirrors the plane. So yeah, you would see it in there. If you played DCS, I show it in some of my videos. But yeah, so the SA page, it'll basically be an overhead view, and you can expand in, expand out. And what'll happen is link 16 is the data link network that we use, or one of them, right? And so other assets like the Princeton, in the case of the Nimitz, right? The Princeton has the Aegis, it's an Aegis cruiser with their amazing Spy 1 radar. So they can lock up targets from very far away, and they can pass that information through data link to the fighters. And the fighters will get a little, whatever it is, a friendly circle or a hostile red Dorito, we call it, like a little red triangle. And you use that to fight, right? You have a map overlay. And as the flight lead now, if I have a 4-ship, I'm going to use my 4-ship in certain formations to maximize our firepower, right? And we're going to preserve our range, use all these different fighter techniques. But you're primarily that's a huge help. That's situational awareness. If I can put an enemy, if I can put a little red Dorito over a bad guy, they're probably going to blow up. And that's so powerful. Yeah, especially in air war, knowledge really is power. And so it gives you a huge advantage. Well, so what he's saying is, hey, there's a fleet of them on the SA, is on that little overhead view, they're surrounded by contacts, and it probably shows up as unknown because they don't know what they are, right? If they knew what they are, they'd show it as friendly. That's a friendly Hornet. That's a commercial airliner. This is unknown traffic or something like that. So that's what he's saying when he says, hey, there's a fleet of them on the SA. There's a group of them, and then they're able to lock one with their targeting pod. I think just by visually seeing it, like seeing little dots in the targeting pod and then zooming in onto one and then manually locking it, because there's no radar information, there's no range information in any of these things, which is really strange to me, actually, that there's no ranging information. I don't know if that's because they consider it maybe classified, or they're like, hey, don't release that, there's range information, or more likely I get the impression they don't know.
Yeah, well, I think I had actually asked a question on one of your videos when it says range 999.99 or whatever. I remember hearing Fravor say something about that is jamming. That means that there's something actively jamming the rangefinder or something, or the radar at least.
Yeah, I believe that was in the Joe Rogan. I tracked that down, I think, to the Joe Rogan podcast. He mentions there. It relates to jamming.
And see, you talk about the Lex Friedman interview, and for me, it was the Joe Rogan interview. I saw that one before the Lex Friedman, and I was like, holy crap. Plus, he's wearing a Detroit Tigers jersey. So now I was really interested. But
yeah, I just watched the Joe Rogan one recently this past month. It filled in a lot of the gaps for me.
Yeah. All right. So we talked a little bit about your training and stuff, and we're kind of hit on procedures and things like that. Could you give us just a brief rundown on some of the procedures that you used in your analysis of the videos? Are these techniques that you were taught as a fighter pilot? Probably more like a safety officer, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'll use the gimbal since we'll just kind of finish talking about those 3. I'll use them as an example.
Okay.
Yeah, the gimbal, what was really useful for that is it's a turning engagement, right? The other ones, the go fast is a high to low, but the plane is the F-18 is just going straight. And in the FLIR 1, the F-18 is also going straight again, right? So the gimbal is the only one where we have an actual, and that just gives you a ton more information. Like really, that was the one where I was like, okay, this one I can dial in on this one. because if we're turning now, if you think about it, if you just point out in front of you, right, and you start turning, and you're looking at an object that's 10 feet away, okay, or you're looking at an object that's 10 miles away, what you're going to find is at 10 miles away, in order to track with your hand, that object's got to be going like, Mach 8 or something ridiculous. It's got to travel a huge expanse of sky, right? Whereas if it's closer now, it has to travel a smaller expanse of sky. So just the fact that it was turning now, you can use those angles and figure it out. And I think that just came from standard. Yeah, that's what you do. That is a normal fighter engagement within visual range. You want to ID bad guys far out, ID them as hostile, and then shoot them at range. But if you can't, for some reason, you close, and then you get into within visual range now. Now you're in the dogfight arena. And for that, it's all circles, right? It's my weapons versus your weapons, and then who can point at the other one first and get a ballot shot. And really, like we mentioned before, you mentioned getting behind the jet, right? Well, the problem with the jet is that you can't hit stop, right? You can't park the plane. So once you get behind the jet, it's very difficult to catch up, right? Because you have to be going faster than you were before mentally, or you got to take some shortcuts. And that's when people get in problems. And if there's add in an emergency now you can have crashes, etc. So it was really those turns, and then now I could use kind of what we did on a daily basis to reenact the engagements. Fravor talked about it, where you really have to draw it up. And as you go through your daily training in the squadron, you're training, you learn to be a wingman first, then you learn to be a 2-ship flight lead, 4-ship flight lead, instructor, or mission commander, then instructor. You have to pass these tests. It's very rigorous on being able to draw it adequately so that you can debrief. So the gimbal, that's really what allowed it. So for that, looking into the targeting pod, I did what we did on a normal basis, is reenact, draw the engagement up again. And then I use some of those trigonometric tricks, or I love trigonometry. I love math. I love all that stuff when you can use it for real world knowledge. I think it's so cool. And so I was able to use that to overlay it.
I think it's time to hear a word from our sponsors and from some friends of the podcast.
Hi, this is Sev Talk from MUFON and the author of You Have the Right to Talk to Aliens and the host of Alien Spirit TV with Sev on YouTube. You're listening to Wayne and Michelle at the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hey there, it's Richard Serrett, occasional weekend guest host of Coast to Coast AM and host of The Conspiracy Show. And you're listening to Wayne and Michelle's Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
What's up, everyone? This is Burton.
And Aaron from Lost in the Dark podcast.
And raise your horns because you're listening to Wayne and Michelle from the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hi there, this is Christina Gomez of Paradigm Shifts and the Debrief Media, and you're listening to Wayne and Michelle on the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? This is Big Willie with the UFO Garage podcast, where we're all about UFOs, aliens, and all things weird. I also run a podcast, Band of Bearded Brothers, with my brother Micah, BOBB for short, and you are listening to Wayne and Michelle with the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. So take a seat and buckle up as they educate us on all things woo.
I was just sitting here thinking, when you said use it in the real world, and a lot of students, when I'm teaching science or I hear from the math teachers, the kids would probably be more engaged if there's a way we could find, to take a kid in Algebra 2 and have them apply it in some way in a real world situation. And the kids don't kind of get that. But now I'm thinking I should make some kind of a lesson where the kids have to diagram a UFO UAP engagement from fighters and calculate, Mach 0.6 is 1 mile per, 1 mile per minute, is it?
So it's 0.6 is 6 miles a minute.
6 miles a minute. 6 miles a minute. So
yeah, which is easy because then it goes to a mile every 10 seconds.
And again, before I jump into the area here, I want to get into that's going to be probably a little controversial. Again, I just want to back up that, civilians, I was an infantry grunt. Okay. I was permanently on the ground, except if I was jumping out of an airplane or rappelling out of a helicopter. So, I was that guy on the ground that was probably going to get bombed to death,
Yes.
but civilians don't understand like the training that is involved in the money. I mean, our defense budget's huge. So the training of people flying multi-million-dollar aircraft for defense of our airspace and this country is no joke. I mean, there's no better in the world. That's why we can dominate anywhere we go. And we train other countries and things. So that brings me to like my next kind of, let's dig into the dirt a little bit. So when those 3 videos were released, I noticed that there seemed to be a rush of debunkers out there that start running out there and they start attacking. Well, the pilots don't know what they're talking about or what they see. Oh, it's lens flare. This is the heat blooms from the jet engine of another aircraft. Oh, that's a small plane. That's a bird. That's a weather balloon. And you talk about this in a couple of your YouTube videos, which I thought was fascinating. And you even went head to head with one of these debunkers, I guess, and that was Mick West. So what are your thoughts on the people who almost seem invested in some way to prove these things are not some type of craft in our airspace that we can't identify? Now, nobody's saying they're aliens. We don't know what they are. We can't identify them. I'm not making that leap yet. And it just seems to me that there's almost an investment of saying that the Navy is wrong. The Aegis cruisers, which are the most sophisticated in the world, set to protect nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and can shoot down missiles with their missiles. Their radar is so good to protect the fleets. What's your thought on these people? And I don't want to pick on them, but just when they're attacking like military and things like that and blowing you guys off. And I saw your debate with Mick and he just poo-pooed anything that you were trying to say. And I'm like, this guy has 18 years of military training. Do you know what that means? And then when I said that in my own head, it clicked. Like, no, he doesn't know what that means. He doesn't get the 70 to 80 hours of training. Like I was trained on the TOW-2 anti-tank system, launching it off of a Humvee. We trained like crazy on those things, the different optics we could use and things like that to take out tanks, 3 miles away using a wire guided missile. So I could do those systems back in the day. I mean, that was 30 years ago, but just I don't know, the disregard for our aviators in what you guys go through kind of threw me for a loop. And then I was like, he's just ignorant. But what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I had a meeting with Mick West last week about the gimbal simulator. He spent, I don't know how many hundreds of hours or how long it take him, but he basically coded this simulator. You can go, it's on his website, I'm not going to mention it. But anyway, I'm not going to give him, actually, I think in the end, so my short answer is any publicity is good publicity, especially about this topic, because it just goes away, right? You can show people, hey, there's this, look, all of these crazy events, look at Nimitz, it's been out since 2017. You kind of mentioned that, hey, these debunkers came out right away, but they've been there kind of from the beginning. In 2017, when Lou Elizondo, when he started talking about this and the New York Times article came out, it seemed like there was some uproar, but then it goes back to, okay, what about Afghanistan? What about our healthcare issues. You know, it just goes out of the limelight. So as long as they're not actively lying and trying to, you know, pass out misinformation, then I think it's actually healthy. You know, you need someone approaching it from a skeptical viewpoint, or that, you know, is fully skeptical. You know, I'm pretty sure Mick West is fully skeptical, and he approaches it from that angle. But I don't think we should be blaming him, you know, because people watch him. You know, my recent video, look at my recent videos. They've been 10xing his videos and views. So ultimately, it's, you know, I don't even really need to, if he's correct, if he has a valid point, then I should address it, you know, because if it's valid, then it updates the algorithm.
Yeah.
It updates the solution. And that's what I want. I just want to find out, like you guys, you know, I think you get tired of the politicians and the cultural things, and I think we're all just kind of monkeys, right? And we have really, really huge, intense biases that we can't see, which is laughable when you really start analyzing what it is to be human, you know. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's good. I think what Mick West does is actually good. His methods maybe can be annoying and frustrating, you know. But at the end of the day, if he's correct on things, I think people should listen and then update the solution, you know. So I think he actually could be correct on the gimbal rotating as something internal to the pod, and that, you know, I think that could be correct, and that doesn't change my solution. You know, if you go back to my last video on it, I think that it's still inside of 10 nautical miles and should be identifiable, right? It shouldn't show up as a, you know, whatever 15 foot across or 30 foot across circle in any instance, right? And then the fact that it rotates, the fact that it can put a glare like that onto an FLIR system, onto that system that's specifically designed to not be jammed, right? You know, those are military grade systems. I think that thing's like $2 or $3 million. It's not some little run of the mill system, right? It's designed to not be jammed by enemy lasers, by enemy systems. Okay, so
it's not the $300 FLIR little thing he's using in his garage? And Mick, if you listen to this, I'm not disparaging you. I'm calling into question his procedures. They're not scientific at all. And the reason I say that is because using an iPhone, within an iPhone, to video a light bulb in your garage and spinning it around is not the same thing as going out and asking the Navy to rent an F-18 and have an experiment, right? And repeat the experiment with the exact same equipment, same atmospheric conditions, and have these things peer reviewed. And that's why that's why I'm saying, like, it seems like there's almost an investment of, I'm going to waste my time and energy to prove that these things are wrong, even though I don't have the same equipment. I don't have the FLIR technology. And, you know, I can reproduce all kinds of stuff in my garage too. That doesn't mean that's how it happened. And so I guess that's where my science kicks in. It's like, I want a list of your procedures. I want to be able to repeat it. And it's got to be repeatable, and it's got to be something we can measure. And, you know, you're putting numbers to it. You know, you're doing the trigonometry. You're talking about the speeds and the distances involved and how you're coming to those answers. That's real. And you're using real world data. That's the stuff I'm more drawn to, and why I wanted to talk to you about these things. And light bulbs and iPhones and, you know, not the right equipment is not something that I'm going to pay serious attention to. And maybe that, as you were talking about biases, maybe that's my bias, right?
Well, it's funny. I tell you, I always get asked about Mick West, you know?
Oh, really? Okay.
And I guess, yeah. And the point is, I guess I'll know he's gone when I don't get asked about him, you know? It's like, it's like Voldemort. You know, like they don't say Voldemort, you know, like
right. He who shall not be named.
Yeah. No, but I actually I don't mind working with Mick. Whatever. I think as long as his solution, if you just, it's how you do it too, right? If you just throw out troll comments on Twitter and you actually never go and do any work,
Yeah,
that's one thing. Which there's a lot of people that do that anonymously, right? These guys, I'm like, whatever.
oh yeah, the keyboard
the
warriors.
anonymous trolls. Yeah, I'm like, okay, man, you don't even use your real name, and you want me to take you seriously? Yeah, whatever. But Mick West, he's out there. He's using his real name. He went and designed that whole simulator, built this whole simulator that shows that it would be possible if you have some kind of internal systems. But it's difficult, right? It's classified. So he's going to hit against some wall. But yeah, I'd say, talking about them makes them more powerful. And then, but we should listen if they have any valid points.
I agree.
Just approach the angle from a different view. I approach it from, hey, I think it could and most likely is true that it's extraterrestrial, or it's definitely on the table. It's a definite possibility. And he approaches it from the other side. But as long as he's open with his analysis, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Like I said, my bias, and immediately when I see that, hey, our pilots flying these aircraft, can't identify things in the air. Are you kidding me? We have they are the top trained observers. They're only going to look at things that are going to be anomalous. Like, why is that there? What? Because they do this all the time, and it's life or death. I mean, I just, anyways, I don't want to get on it because I'm showing my bias.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, all you really need is one valid event.
Yes.
You just need one, right? If you have one valid event, it opens up the door to everything else, or at least many other cases. And for me, the Nimitz is one valid event. I mean, you have those 4 aviators with their eyes seeing it. You have radar contacts. They got it on FLIR 1. Well, yeah, so I'll just go to the FLIR 1 then.
Yeah.
Just to finish out the 3 videos. So the gimbal, we kind of finish on that. I think nothing has really changed for me on the final solution. I think it's inside of 10 nautical miles. I think it's anomalous. And the glare, the gimbal rotation looks like it could be from inside the targeting pod, but it's still anomalous. Like, it shouldn't be putting a glare like that into a system designed to not be.
We're jamming military radar.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the whole thing is anomalous. Yeah. And so that was the gimbal, right? And then we go to the FLIR 1 now. So for me, that event was, you have those 4 aviators, and then they launch again, and they try and lock onto this thing. Chad Underwood does, right?
And
he goes to
FLIR
the
1,
cap point.
just to be clear, FLIR 1 is the Tic Tac, correct?
Yes. Yep. So basically, David Fravor, he's out with a 2-ship. He's training up Dietrich, right? She's new to the squadron, or newish. She's a lieutenant. And they're doing an air defense exercise. So 2v2, they're defending the carrier, and they're integrating with the Princeton, the ship. And everything is defend the carrier. From my limited understanding, everything's about defending the carrier from exocet missiles. And so they use the airplanes as like the long range artillery, kind of, if you think of it that way. And then the Princeton, it does kind of your quarterbacking. They can see everything on the radars. And then the carrier, I guess, just drives around really fast, try not to get shot. And so they went on that, and the Marines 2-ship of Hornets takes off first, goes 100 miles away to their red cap far away. And then David Fravor takes off with Dietrich and goes to their blue cap. They're vectored out to the west, I assume by Kevin Day. I don't know if that was the actual controller. Do you know if Kevin Day was a controller?
I think he was. Yeah, I think he was. He was the one that asked them, what's your weapons complement? And
okay, he did do that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then, so as they take off, they vector out to the west, south of the San Clemente Island, kind of out in the middle of, the ocean, essentially. And basically, they vector out there. They see the tic tac. They have about a 5-minute engagement with it, where it maneuvers it with them and then disappears, essentially, back to their cap point. Okay, they go to their cap point, and it's not there. They never see it again. They do the air defense exercise, and when they come back to land now, Fravor tells Underwood, who's launching on his own training mission. And I believe Underwood's working with the Hawkeye. So now the Hawkeye's out there. That's an E2. It's a airborne warning and control system. They have a much larger radar. They can detect also weird signals, right? They have ESM capabilities. So they're also out there, and they vector Underwood onto this contact. He locks it up with his targeting pod, and that is the FLIR 1 video, which I think it looks just like a Tic Tac. Originally I didn't. It's funny when you don't think things are possible, you just can't even see them. Or if you're so sure one direction, the other side just is blind. Your brain kind of makes you blind to it. But
Absolutely.
I went back and looked again, and the IR, TV, it looks just like kind of like a brown Tic Tac, if you will. It's an TV optical of that video. But then if you look in IR, it looks just like a cylinder. It looks just like
it does.
You described. Yeah. So that is the FLIR 1 video. So for that one, I was just listening to Kevin Knuth. He actually made a peer review paper with Peter Reali, and sorry, I forget the third person that actually wrote it. And they talked about the accelerations that would be required. And so there's some interesting things from the actual video. When I looked at it, it appears to break lock, okay, at the end, right? If you look at the very end of the video, and it looks like the object shoots out of the left of the screen very quickly. So Mick West, basically his argument was that it actually, if you track the targeting pod as it's actually tracking across the screen, right? It's actually tracking. And when the targeting pod loses lock, it will stop tracking. If that makes sense, right? Yep. So it's on auto track. It's on an auto track. It's automatically tracking. And then when it loses lock, it just stops wherever it's pointing. And that's how it works in the F-16, actually. Now Underwood could have been continuing to push to the left, right? He has a little cursor. He can control it with a little thumb cursor. I think it's his middle finger in the F-18. So he can control the cursor to put it back onto the object, but we just don't have any of that data. I don't know if he was pushing it in. If as a safety officer, I could tell you 100% if he was, right? I would get the black box data, and I would get inputs from the cockpit, and it would say, rear cockpit is inputting a cursor left switch actuation. But we don't have that data. Or, just give me the radar data. With the radar tapes, I could probably confirm it as well, just by having some other reference, or the Hawkeye radar tapes.
Right.
That would also help, or the Princeton radar tapes. But
we don't have a lot of the data that exists. We get 27 seconds of, videos.
Yeah. Well, the Underwood did talk. And so according to him, he says it just shoots off. And based on the range, I think he could see like a dot. I think the pilot could have made contact, visual contact at that range. Kind of hard. It really depends on the environmentals and everything, but it's possible that he could have seen something actually physically fly if it did. But for me, the more telling thing, or telling conclusion, is that there's nothing faster than an F-18, right, that we know about, except for a missile system. If that thing was somehow could be flying and then could somehow put on rockets, right, then you're going to be able to outmaneuver an F-18. But there's nothing out there that can outmaneuver it that we know about. No air-breathing device that can outmaneuver an F-18. So it either just like went stealth, or they just lost it, or more likely, what I think is that it did disappear in some instance. So I guess I can't prove that it flew off the screen.
At least with the limited data that you have. I mean, that's all we've got. What Underwood says happened after the lock, and that's pretty much it.
For me, the thing on that is the visual. That the visual from that video matched the visual description that Fravor gave and Dietrich gave, and Slate. He also confirmed it from so it matched that for me. That was amazing.
FLIR 1, or the Tic Tac, appeared back at the cap point, where the combat patrol zone, almost like it knew where where the planes were supposed to be going. And I think if you do that calculation, it was like 60 miles in 5 seconds. It was like something like 700 and some miles per hour in an instant, or something like that. It was some ridiculous number.
Not even possible. Yeah. So it was 60 miles, and I think he said in 30 seconds is what he said.
Okay.
So that would be, 60 miles and 30. That's 30 seconds in a minute. sorry, 30 miles in a minute. So that's Mach 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're
like I said, nothing
1,400 miles per hour, something along those lines.
Yeah. So that would be Mach 3 right there. And so nothing can move that fast that we know about if it's the same thing. Supposedly it is, it had the same signature is what they said, and it had the same track number. But there was also even more telling is before they had the interaction with the Tic Tac, is they were seeing these contacts from the ballistic missile defense system. So they were seeing contacts from space come down to 80,000 feet. And then in groups of 10 or 20. And then at 80,000 feet now, the Princeton radar was picking them up, the Spy-1 radar. And from 80,000 feet, they were seeing them drop down to 28,000 feet and then down to the surface in less than a second. And that's even crazier. If you look at that, those numbers, Kevin Knuth calculated out to 5,000 Gs.
Yeah.
So 5,000 Gs is, and that's what he's talking about. These are spaceship speeds. If you're talking, what would a spaceship need to actually get around to other planets? And that is what you would need. Like with that, you could go to other planets.
Yeah, that's, that kind of gets overlooked. And one thing that gets overlooked too, and I know we're running short on time. One of the things that I find fascinating that gets glossed over is the fact that the Tic Tac was first spotted by Fravor over a disturbance of water. What was going on in the ocean with that thing above it? What is this thing doing? Or what was under the water to cause the water to break the way that it was? And then that disappeared when the Tic Tac came up to almost seem like it was going to engage them. And that kind of gets forgotten because the Tic Tac stuff is so fascinating. But what's going on? I mean, our oceans are largely unexplored. That aspect of it always gets me. Like, what are they doing?
There was an amazing, I was reading an article just for this last video I did last week. I saw that there was an account, and this was in the debrief article. It was in the debrief that basically there's a very, very clear video of a triangle coming out of the ocean, a large triangle. And it basically had three white, at every vortice, there was large white circles. 3 circles on the vortice, and this large triangle just comes out of the ocean and then goes straight up into space.
And that sounds exactly like what myself and my wife saw. And
is that what you saw?
That's yeah.
Yeah, it was the triangular.
It was the triangle. It was about, if I was estimating size, 250 to 300 feet aside, hovering above the road. Yeah, it was insane. Cool. It changed our whole trajectory of our lives, like doing this podcast and talking to people and trying to learn things. And my curiosity is just like, I want my hands on it. I'm a nuts and bolts guy, as I've been called by previous guests, because, I'm fascinated with the materials. I'm fascinated with what they're doing here. I'm not on board with the Space Brothers thing just yet, because, if you can't divulge what you're doing in our airspace and things like that, I don't necessarily trust you. And I know some people do. When we ran into this thing and we had to drive very close to it, I mean, I was gunning my Jeep. I was like, we're getting the hell out of here, because I don't know what this thing is, because it's not an aircraft. It's not an aircraft I've ever seen before. And it's hovering with these 3 lights in each corner, and it rotates and starts moving parallel to us along the expressway. It didn't bank. There was no aerodynamics at all. And it was shimmering. It had like a skin to it that was absorbing the light, almost like the Predator type of thing, like a cloaking thing. It was absorbing the street lights that were reflecting off the ground.
It was at night.
Yes, it was at 2:30 in the morning when we saw this thing. And it was, we were not out drinking. We were playing hardcore bingo at a bingo hall.
Yes.
So, I don't drink. I don't ever drink. Michelle, maybe once in a while, but, I was driving and I was like, okay, there's an airliner. We're very close to Detroit Metro Airport. I said, there's an airliner It's very low. There's no place for it to land. I think it's going to crash on the road. And as we got closer, I noticed that those were not landing lights. They were like these orbs that were controlling the release of the light. It was very bright, but it wasn't shining onto the ground, and it was low. And I could make out the edge of a huge triangle. And Michelle saw it better than I did once I got on the expressway, and she saw it rotate. And then she could see the back of it. And there was a couple of these, what did you say?
The rectangular red lights.
Red lights that would be on the opposite of the apex, kind of like an engine. And then we lost sight of it.
Like a drawing? Yeah, I love that stuff. So cool. Man.
Yeah. No, I don't. I can easily draw something up. But I've scanned, the interwebs and found all kinds of pictures of triangles and things that I'm like, that's very similar to what we saw.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Just a link or something. I'm very curious.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a huge theory in that. My nature of the universe theory. Probably for a different podcast though.
Yeah, we can save that for another time.
Their basically control mechanisms. The idea is we're in a much larger ecosystem than we understand.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
So these are connections with the rest of the ecosystem that we just haven't yet started to understand.
Well, I know you're pressed for time, loving your retired life there in Portugal and having a great time, and you got some appointments you got to get to, because I did want to ask you a little bit about the UAPs that seem to be observing the Aegis cruisers. There's Aguadia, there's the Turkish UFO, but we'll save that for another time. We're going to go ahead and get ready to close you out here.
All right. So the signature question, Chris, do you have any connection to Michigan at all?
To Michigan? I have happy thoughts when I think of it. No, that's it.
Is it because it's the state that can wave to you?
The mitten state.
The mitten state.
I don't know why I went there. I went to a wedding outside of Detroit, actually. And I remember very pretty. It was very pretty with the countryside, with the flowers and the trees. And that's my only connection, I guess. No.
Okay.
You guys know.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
And speaking of your YouTube channel and stuff, do you have anything planned coming up on your YouTube channel that is about this phenomenon? And how can people find you and reach you?
Yeah, every week. So every week on Friday, I publish. Lately, it's been exactly about these nuts and bolts kind of engagements. But I am, like you said yourself, just you want to know. You're just really interested. And I do think that we have to understand more of the big picture of the universe before we're going to start to figure this out. It's obviously been 80 years, and it's been 80 years for probably a few reasons. And so, so anyway, I publish every Friday on my YouTube. So it's just my name, Chris Lehto. You can just search there, and yeah.
Awesome. All right, Chris. Well, thank you very much. And we will hopefully talk to you soon. This was great. Thanks for being our 1 year anniversary and our season finale guest.
Awesome. Happy to be on. Congrats.
See, Michelle, I told you that was a great interview.
It was a great way to end the first year of the podcast.
Yes, I agree. That's what a season finale. What an awesome guest to have on. I really tried not to rant too much, but I have to say, and I'm going to say it here again, I really get irritated by people that discount our highly trained military personnel, especially the pilots. These aviators are the cream of the crop. You don't fly a $70 million aircraft for the government to defend our country. You don't give that to just anybody.
When they say that they're the eyes in the sky, they're the eyes in the sky.
Yeah, they are trained on how to spot aircraft and how to use these high-tech target designator pods, or the designation pods that they have, the FLIR. They know how to use the cameras. They know these things inside and out and use them to identify all kinds of things. And when they're flying these jets and they come across these UAPs and they get them in the targeting pod and they don't know what it is, and you can watch the videos of the gimbal of the FLIR 1, also known as the Tic Tac, and you can watch the Go Fast. You can hear these guys, they don't know what these things are. They've seen hundreds of jets. They've seen hundreds of small aircraft, drug runners and things like that, helicopters, you name it. And yet we still have people out there that want to say that these guys don't know what they're talking about or what they saw. It's just mind-boggling. And by the way, I'm just going to throw this out there. These guys never fly alone. They're always flying with a wingman, and they're usually in a flight of 2 or 4. And depending on the aircraft, each aircraft may have 2 people inside of it, the pilot and the weapons officer. That's what they call the Wizzo that sits in the back of the F-18. So you have 4 sets of eyes looking and seeing these things, chasing them down, and trying to get good video and identify what these things are. Nope, that's lens flare. No, you're looking at a plane or a weather balloon, even though the weather balloon is sitting perfectly still and the winds are 120 miles per hour. I mean, I don't know what else needs to happen for people to get it, but there are just some people out there, and maybe they're scared that their world's going to be turned upside down with this knowledge. But these things seem like they've been here for quite a while and observing us, observing them, observing us. I don't know. It's a pet peeve. I get irritated with it. And I understand where they come from. And it's good to have skeptical people. But sometimes if you're too skeptical, that can cost you. So, I don't know. I find these people to be very credible. And by the way, the radar planes that are flying, like he says, the Hawkeye, the E-2 Hawkeye, or if the Air Force is flying a command and control radar system, it's the AWACS, right? These things are picking up things floating and flying around in the sky, and you're telling me that our aviators can't identify them. It's nuts. Sorry for anybody out there that's a skeptic. I'll listen to you, but the credibility of our pilots is very, very high. I don't know, Michelle, you got that look on your face. What do you think? I know I'm ranting a little bit.
It's okay, Goose. I got you.
All right. Great. All right. So, closing out the podcast, right? I
think we took a look at the countries that listen to the podcast. And one of the countries where we do have listeners is the Ukraine.
Yeah, so we decided that we wanted to just give a quick shout out to the people in the Ukraine. We want you all to stay safe and get through this military action that's happening from Russia. It's a very complex political thing. It's not a 3-minute snippet on any news site that's going to tell you what's been
YouTube
going on.
Video. So
right. This goes long and deep for Russian and Ukrainian and their internal problems. It's very, very nuanced and very, very complicated and complex.
But we're thinking about you.
Yes.
We are praying for your safety. And through the words of one of my favorite poets, and in fact, my students are studying some of her work now, and it is Mrs. Maya Angelou, and it is Still I Rise.
So this one is for you, the people of Ukraine.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes of springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, remember, keep your eyes to the sky.
You have been listening to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. You can reach us at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at mi_UFO and join our Facebook group by searching for Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters. So until next time.